The UK is one of several countries who've told their citizens to leave Lebanon. America, France, Canada, Japan, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia are all on the list of nations concerned about the risk of war. Tom Fletcher is a former UK ambassador to Lebanon. We can speak to him now. Morning to you. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, coming through loud and clear.
What's your assessment of how likely war actually is?
Well, things are on a knife edge. Clearly, we're in this sort of tit-for-tat escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, and these are very dangerous moments. There's a real risk of miscalculation, and that's why these warning lights are flashing so brightly red on the dashboard at the moment, and why the messages are so clear from David Lammy and other leaders that internationals have got to get out of Lebanon.
What can stop this from escalating, do you think? I mean, clearly there are, various interested parties, people who are linked to either side. Israel is, fighting a war on many fronts right now. Is there an interest, or is there a country that can stop this from escalating, or do you think it might burn itself out?
It might well burn itself out. It sometimes does. It has in the past. Israel and Hezbollah have ways of de-escalating. There are contacts behind the scenes. Massive diplomatic effort, of course. And David Lammy, John Healey from the UK were there last week. The ambassadors on the ground. I spoke to our ambassador last night, working round the clock to try to avoid a catastrophic escalation. But ultimately, this is about the wider Middle East peace process. I talked this morning to the Lebanese Prime Minister, and what he's saying is that the route to peace in the region starts with that peace between Israel and Gaza. Ending that conflict and getting back to a two-state solution reduces the pressure that the rest of the region is then feeling.
You say that you spoke to one of the officials in Lebanon. How many British people are there? I mean, roughly right now.
So I spoke to my successor, the ambassador in Beirut, who's an excellent, experienced diplomat who will have been going over this crisis and evacuation plan for months and years. It's one of the most tested crisis plans that the Foreign Office has. I don't have the exact number. I'm no longer in the Foreign Office, but from my time, I'd say there were probably 3,000 or 4,000 Brits still in Lebanon itself.
And in these kind of situations where a warning is people are told to get out, presumably not everybody does. Who does and who doesn't?
That's right. I mean, you may have a lot of long-term residents who stick around, who know the country pretty well, who might feel that they're in areas that might not be affected by the conflict. We don't know how big this next phase of the conflict will be. So it's more likely to be those long-term residents that decide to take the punt, to take the risk, and stick it out. What I would hope is that all of the short-term visitors, those who've been there for a weekend or a week, or maybe people who are planning visits to Lebanon, that they've made changes to their plans and have got out via commercial routes. We tested constantly all the options for getting people out, the maritime routes, which is why you've got ships in the area, the potential for getting people out by land, but those are restricted now because of the conflict in Syria, and of course, getting people out by commercial and other forms of air. That's often more difficult in an escalating conflict because there is always the risk, as has happened in the past, that Israel will hit the airport.
Now, some other commentators we've spoken to over the last couple of days have said that they're worried, but ultimately they don't think that there will be a war. There won't be an all-out conflict erupting. If there were, though, I mean, people can get their citizens out, but it's the poor people of Lebanon, of Beirut, who we know have already suffered many catastrophes over recent times, who would suffer.
Yes, indeed. And that has to be front and center of our plans, our strategy at the moment. Of course, it's vital to be focusing all this time and energy on protecting Brits who are out there. But ultimately, we have to stop this wider escalation. We have to stop an even worse humanitarian catastrophe than the one that we're already seeing in Gaza, drawing in more countries in the region. There are hardliners in Israel and in Iran who are ready to see that happen. And it will be the civilians in Israel and Lebanon who suffer most. The Lebanese people, the Israeli people in northern Israel, they don't want this conflict. They don't want, they know what's at stake here, but they're being dragged into it by hardliners in those governments.
Tom, thank you very much for talking to us. That's Tom Fletcher, who is a former UK ambassador to Lebanon.